Yeah, it hasn't shown up yet. Now, I have heard people complain that when they begin one and cancel it and start another one, YouTube doesn't pick it up. I'm not seeing your feed live yet. All right, here we go. Hey, you're live now. There is a dead one now. On my television, I'm looking at your channel, and when you go to the live, it still says waiting.
It might be the old one.
There it is. You're up. The old one's gone. Successfully connected.
All right, still not feeding here. So,
Tony entered the chat. Hey, Tony.
Hey, Tony. I got a couple technical difficulties here trying to get so I can see chats on my computer here. So, give me a minute or two, and then we'll get started. Let's see. So. Okay, here we go. All right, there we go. All right, thanks for tuning in to my first ever live stream on ADV Matt. And this was a recommendation by Frank, who is joining me today, who is also a KTM 390 adventure rider. So if you don't know Frank, he has his own YouTube channel at One Old Man Riding. So real quick, Frank, go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm one of the many people that saw ADV Matt riding and decided this is a bike I think I want to get. So thanks to Matt reviewing a GB windscreen and going up some really rough terrain, it's what pushed me over the edge to buy a 390. So it's ironic that I'm here now with Matt because he's the only reason I own the bike.
All right, thanks, Frank. Yeah, it was just for a little background. If you're not familiar, I picked up the KTM 390 Adventure at the end of 2020. It was around August, and from there, started making content. And at the time, I think if you've seen any of Frank's videos, you'll know that I was probably the first one to do English videos on the KTM 390 Adventure, and that really it took off and really built my channel, and I've got a pretty strong following. So I want to thank you all that tune in to all the different things that I've done with my bike, the travel I've done, the modifications that I've done, the repairs that I've done, some of the things that I've broke as I've gone through the riding that I've done. But we're at a point now where the small adventure motorcycle market is blossoming into, I think, really where we want it to be, maybe not exactly what we want it to be. So Frank had an idea that we could came up with in talking about the bikes that we are going to see coming at the end of 2024 into probably for us getting the new KTM 390 Adventure won't be until 2026. But now is a good time going into it to talk about basically the three bikes that we see is fitting in that market. And that is the Royal Enfield 450 Himalayan, the CFMoto 450, or was it NT 450, and then also the new KTM 390 Adventure, which looks like it's going to be a lot more enduro than the current one, which if you look at the current one, it's more street oriented, where this other one is going to be very off-road oriented, which is exciting. And some of the things that they've done with the engine. So we're going to talk about that over the next 45 minutes or so. Just so you know, there is a delay with the questions that come through. We will answer questions periodically, but we really wanted just to have a discussion about these bikes. So anything else you want to add, Frank?
Not really, other than I think that Matt and I were both in the same position I think a lot of people are today. Matt was coming from an incredibly heavy bike, and I was coming from a KLR 650, which was also an incredibly heavy bike. And I think over time, more and more people are embracing the lighter bike. And that's why I think these bikes that are coming up are going to be more important than the 390 was back in the day.
Yeah, I agree. So really, just because we're having a discussion about bikes, we're just going to go ahead and launch into this. And I don't think we'll we'll go cover much of what the old 390 was in comparison. We're going to look at what's coming out new and features that are going to be on these new bikes, why we're excited about the possibilities of those. And then really at the end, we're theoretically going to put our money where our mouth is and make a choice of, if we had the ability to choose one of these bikes, which one would it be? So starting off with the Royal Enfield Himalayan 450, I find this bike to be interesting. The other bike, the 411 Himalayan, was not intriguing to me at all. Low horsepower, low suspension travel, and it was heavy as heck. 5-speed transmission. It really didn't fit for the type of riding that I'm used to, which is um, wide open riding in the West. I need something with a 6th gear so that I can really get the higher speeds. So with the new one coming out, TFT screen, it's got connectivity, upside down forks, almost 8 inches of travel. We're looking at 9 inches of ground clearance, which was really a problem with the old one. And then the wheel set, 2117, so it still has some good off-road. The 21-inch tire will have the rollover that we're looking for and be better off-road. The fuel tank is expanded. It's up to 4.5 gallons. Still a good seat height. I think that was one of the things that was really appealing about the old Himalayan, was the low seat height. It was easy. It was approachable to newer riders. And this one still comes in at 32 inches. I think it's a little bit taller than the other one, but really that's still very approachable for people that are vertically challenged. Brake wise, they've gone with bigger rotors, which is great. And then the other thing I think is cool is they've got multiple levels that are coming out with Himalayan, where the premium level will be tubeless. And I know that with the struggles I've had with tubes and having to replace tubes, I can appreciate having a tubeless wheel setup. So that is something of interest to me as well. And with this new water-cooled engine, more horsepower, more torque. So those are really the pros of it. Frank, you have anything to add as far as the Himalayan on the pros side of things?
Well, the pro I have is for the company. Like you, when I looked at the 411, there was nothing compelling. Absolutely nothing, other than perhaps it was kind of a cool retro look. But when I looked at the power and the weight, I didn't even consider it for a moment. So you've covered all the specs, and I think what that speaks to me is Royal Enfield is so very serious. I think that they're going to support this bike incredibly well, because it's obvious that they went back to the drawing board. They listened to the complaints that everyone was making. It's heavy, it's slow, it's plodding. And they released what is obviously an enduro bike that, other than having an extra 20 pounds, I kind of think it's everything anyone who owns a mid-sized bike is looking for, including tubeless wheels. So it is a bike that shows the company is serious about it, because they went to the drawing board and they said, all right, they want A, B, C, D, E. Let's just give it to them. So I don't know that it's necessarily for me, but damn if they didn't do a good job answering the market's need.
Yeah, the promo videos make it look pretty impressive on what it's capable of, and it'd be great to swing a leg over that. And I would imagine maybe not this year, but in 2025 when they roll out. For those of you that go to the motorcycle rallies, Overland Expos, I expect they'll have some test models there. So if you're wanting to get out and try those bikes, that might be a great place to do it, and check them out. I know that the looks of the bike are a bit polarizing. I kind of like the way it looks. It's taken some of the old look and then also making it look a little bit more newer in its styling. So I am interested to see how well it does. Unfortunately, I think we're going to be stuck like we have been with all new models, where it's going to hit Europe and India at least a full model year before we'll see it. So we won't really know how it's going to perform out here in the West, and the type of riding that we do, which tends to be quite a bit different than what they have in India and what they do in Europe. So, yeah. Now, some of the cons that I was looking at, even being interested in this bike, and is what is a big irritation for me, is anytime there's an airbox under the fuel tank, and that is what they've done with this bike. So if you want to change your air cleaner, you got to pull the tank. I'm not a fan of that.
Unfortunately, Matt, that is becoming a thing. I
It
had to
is.
do it with my V-Strom, and it was hell. And unfortunately, there's an engineer somewhere that said, "This is not an inconvenience. I hope you all get used to it," because it's kind of becoming a thing more and more.
It is, and that's why I can appreciate some of the other manufacturers, like even our KTM. It's under the seat. It's super easy. There's thought going into how to make it user friendly for the average rider, and I think that's important when looking at it, because not everybody's going to be confident or comfortable with removing their fuel tank, which means they're going to have to take it into the dealership, increasing the cost of ownership, because now it's not doing your own maintenance at home. It's you're taking it in. So I think that's a pretty big downside that I think is going to weigh into people's deciding factor on whether or not to purchase this bike.
And that's a big change for the Indian market. The Indian market is not dealer networks like we have. I've spoken with a couple of gentlemen on the Facebook group from India, and primarily guys work on their own bikes or they go to a small local shop where they have to wait forever to get service. It's like perhaps this is Royal Enfield saying we want to build up our dealer network, get people in, because people buy an inexpensive Royal Himalayan, they buy a couple of tools and they take care of it themselves. So this is a strange choice to make.
Yeah, I mean maybe they just didn't have the room to fit in what they wanted in order to keep the seat height down. Maybe it would have raised the seat height and moved things around. So from an engineering standpoint, that's what they decided to do. And you look at the premium brands like Ducati, and you have to pull the tank off of that to get to it on the Multistrada. So yeah. Now a couple things is we really want these small adventure bikes to keep the weight down, and unfortunately, at least the reports right now is that the weight on this bike is going to be around 430 pounds for a single cylinder. That's heavy. I would have preferred to see that if it was under 400. I think it'd be a lot more, especially if you're trying to compete with KTM and what they've done with the 390 Adventure and what they're getting ready to do. It's going to make it challenging. So I think that's probably where the price point is going to make it more appealing. Is some of the things, the refinements that they don't have that the KTM's do, maybe they'll make up for it in price point.
I think we have to be fair here. The weight of the 390 has spoiled us. It's not that the 390 is common, it is significantly lower in weight than anything that's not based on a dual sport chassis. So Royal Enfield has actually come in remarkably well given that they produce heavy bikes. Any Royal Enfield I've looked at and then looked at a comparable Japanese bike, CC, wheelbase, they're always much heavier. I think that the Royal Enfield is going to come in much closer this time around to the competition than they have traditionally. And I'm not sure exactly what the reason is why they're always heavy, but again, kudos to the company, not the bike specifically, but it looks like they considered that the number one complaint or number two everyone makes about their bikes are these are damn heavy bikes. They've brought it much closer to the competition. I mean, to jump ahead, I'll be shocked if the new 390 stays under 400 pounds. I believe it'll be the lightest of the three, but I don't think we're going to be looking at the bizarre low weight that the 390 has today.
No, and we'll talk about this as we get towards the end, but they're just the changes with the increased suspension travel and longer swing arm, longer forks. Those are all going to be areas where the weight goes up, and then they've increased the stroke, so the cylinder is going to be a little bit longer. So I agree with you. I do think it'll come in over 400. So I'm going to look through the chat here real quick, just see if there's any questions on the or any comments on the Royal Enfield. And I do see, let's see. Yeah, Ron, we're going to talk about the CFMoto 450 here in a minute. And I think let's see. Yeah, cool. So any other thoughts on the 450?
Only that I understand they did a lot of work, but there's nothing about it that says more than ride it at a demo day. I don't have any feeling that says I have to move to this bike. It's just
Yeah,
it failed to hit me with anything that was compelling. It's better in every single way than their last bike, but it missed the mark for me. It's just not drawing me in.
I think if given the opportunity to take it for a test ride, I would definitely do that. Reevaluate it after riding it. I think um, when you look at a bike on paper, it doesn't speak anything to what how it handles and performs. So I will look to do that in the next year when I can try to get to some of these motorcycle events. So, all right, so that's Royal Enfield 450 Himalayan. I think the next bike is something of great interest to many of us looking at the small adventure bike, and that is the CFMoto 450 MT. Now, their CFMoto is working closely with KTM on their motorcycles. They have a lot of agreements. They're making engines for them, doing some manufacturing. So I expect that this engine should be a pretty solid engine. It's already out on one of their street bikes. It's a parallel twin in a small compact form is very popular. The CB500, which is also a parallel twin, is a very popular bike, which I think the CF Moto is going to be more of an off-road version of the CB500. They're very similar in weight. They're very similar in power. But the CF Moto, what they've done with this 450 is added traction control, TFT, connectivity, 2118 tire setup. I mean, that speaks off-road. That speaks adventure travel, BDRs, and it's tubeless as well. So that also they're taking a look at where the market is and what we as riders are looking for. Another note that I wanted to bring up with this particular engine is the compression ratio. The compression ratio on this bike is 11.5 to 1, so that engine should last a really long time. To give you a comparison, a QTM 890 is 13.5 to 1. That's a high compression ratio, which typically you expect high compression ratio engines that wear a little bit harder. And with the lower compression ratio, maybe that engine, you'll get 60, 80, 100,000 miles out of it if you take care of it. Suspension travel around 8 inches. I think that's about what we're going to see out of the small bikes. I think another interesting thing that they've done is a rising rate on the rear suspension, which is like with the KTM. I'm sorry, not KTM. The Tenere 700 has a rising rate suspension, and there's a lot of benefits in that. Rising rate and the small bump compliance. It's a very high leverage ratio, so that moves a lot more. And then as it goes through its stroke, your shock is going to stiffen as that rate changes. So it makes it feel a lot better and it gives more tunability. And then out of the small adventure bikes, it's going to have the highest torque too. So it should make it a lot easier to ride, slower in more challenging terrain. Now, weight-wise, I think it's speculated to be around 420 pounds, which for a parallel twin, that's pretty dang good. And then you add in all the extra connectivity and 8 inches of travel. This is a very appealing bike. What are you thinking, Frank?
I'm thinking this is the best bike released in 2 years and the best bike that will be released in the next 2 years. What most people are asking for, and obviously I'm exaggerating a little, but we want a Tenere, but we want it smaller. We want a 790, but we want it smaller. We don't want to compromise. We just want it to be lighter and more nimble. And I think CF Moto is delivering that bike. As you said, it's going to have the twin. It's going to be smooth. It looks like it's built from the ground up to be a touring bike that goes off road. It looks like the bike that you're going to get if you want to be able to commute to work, but you want to be able to ride the BDR. That you want to be able to do 500 miles and then do 500 miles off road. I'm shocked this bike is coming out. I'm terrified of what this bike is going to cost because it really is what you get put in an adventure bike, only we made it a little smaller and lighter. Do you want it? And it's like, yes, yes, I do. And I think there's going to be so many people that say, you know, ADV Matt is insane for riding that single cylinder that far. They're going to say, but wait, this one's a twin. I can I can go without the vibration and go farther more comfortably. That's not to say you can't get on the shakiest single cylinder in the world, the KLR, and ride to Alaska, because somebody's doing it right now. 1,000 people have done it in the past 2 years, but it's not that comfortable. I owned one. It's not great. I think CFMoto is like, all right, fine. You guys want a small bike? We're gonna give it to you, and we're gonna give you all the accoutrement that you expect in a bike today. It's not stripped down. Like going back briefly to the Royal Enfield, it has a lot of bells and whistles, but I don't expect it to ride like anything but a Royal Enfield. Rough around the edges. I expect it to be like a big paint shaker when I'm going down at highway speed. But with this, looking at it, they've been making road bikes that people love for years. They've had a very high success rate with their engines. They've had a fairly good success rate with their partnership with KTM. Let's be honest, CFMoto doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. They're building half of what KTM makes. They've got KTM's technology, they've got their own technology, and they've got the biggest manufacturing in the world. This bike has an opportunity to be what most people want, except for it's got a Chinese brand on it, and that is going to put some people off. But I think that, like the 800 version of their adventure series, I think they're throwing everything, including the kitchen sink, at it to try to say, you wanted it, we gave it to you, let's overlook the Chinese brand, go buy the bike, it's what you want.
I think they've even taken this bike a step further because if you look at the 800, it's heavy. It's heavier than the KTM, and the power production is lower than the KTM bikes, and it's essentially the same engine. I think using the 790. They've taken a lead here by making a much lighter bike that really fits in this market. It has all the off-road, at least on paper, it has the off-road chops in it. Now, one of the things that we're just not going to know until we get a chance to throw a leg over it is how's the weight balance on it? You know, how does it feel? The seat height doesn't seem to be too bad. I think it also, I'm not sure if I wrote that down, but I think it also is coming in around 32 inches, which still is very approachable. And with all the connectivity ride modes, they've really pushed the envelope of what we can do or what they can do with these small adventure bikes and are throwing everything at it. And I want to say that it might be due to the success of the 390 adventure. And I'm not sure that KTM was expecting the 390 adventure to do as well as it has, and seeing that and what riders want has pushed CFMoto to do more. And then also, you know, KTM was planning to bring out the 490, which we were all very excited about, the small parallel twin, and they didn't. They canceled that. Perhaps CFMoto saw that opening and saw that there was a lot of interest in it and are filling it with their. So I am really excited about this bike. I'm looking forward to seeing getting a leg over it and trying it out.
Honestly, I do not believe the CFMoto would exist without the 390 Adventure. The Royal Himalayan probably would not be as good on paper as it is looking at it right now without the 390. The only thing similar before this, something that gave you reasonable weight, reasonable power, was the DR650 from 1,000 years ago. And that didn't convince anyone else to produce a bike. I think that the 390 hit so well worldwide. It sells in Europe, it sells in India, it sells in Asia, it sells in the United States. I am fairly certain that we're getting an actual segment of small adventure bikes because that bike came out. And I say that because it didn't exist before it, and now it's getting pretty full. And the only difference is there was finally a successful bike. The Honda 500, it never really caught critical mass. No one ever started to develop that into an ADV bike. No one ever made other ones. It was the 390 that kicked it off, and I think CFMoto is getting into everything. If there's a market for it, CFMoto is going to make a bike for it. And wow, it's a nice one.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. The 390, the most common comments that I get is either from riders riding big bikes that don't want to ride big bikes anymore, maybe because they're getting older, or they're just tired of wrestling the big bikes and they went to the 390. And then you have people coming in that were new riders and picked up the 390 and have experienced riding from that standpoint. So you're hitting multiple market segments that the big bikes are not going to hit. And it's an approachable bike. It's not an enduro bike. It's capable of doing long distance if you want to do it. So you're right. There wasn't anything before that. The CB500X looks good on paper, but has no ground clearance. If you really want to do anything off road, you got to buy a $3,000 rally raid kit to change the wheels and the forks and the shock. And you don't want to spend another $3,000 on a bike that you're already spending $8,000 on. It just to get it set up, just to get off road. So yeah, they've really, I think the CFMoto is hitting that it's adding to that market area what we want even more than what the 390 Adventure was, with the wheel setup, tubeless, more power, parallel twin, I mean, all those things. So I'm very excited about this bike. I think we're going to be like the rest of, like all other bikes released, we're going to be the last to see this one, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree. The United States is the last market almost from every manufacturer. I mean, there are times where we don't see Hondas and Yamahas for 2.5 years, and in some cases, we don't even get them. We were
Yep.
excited to get the Tenere 700 3.5 years late, and people don't even realize they sold the Tenere 660 for like 6 years and never even bothered to give it to us.
No, they never brought it here. Well, in the Tenere World Raid, at least saying right now, it's never going to make it to the U.S. is the last thing that I had read. They're coming out with a newer version of the Tenere, but the World Raid's never going to make it. Which I'm not sure why they don't bring it to the U.S. market. Maybe we're a bit harder on the bikes than other markets. I don't know.
It's puzzling, but I'm grateful that CFMoto and Royal Enfield have been bringing their bikes here. As you said, we're not going to get them right away, but they've been really good about bringing them here. I think we waited a year and a half for the 800 MT, so that's not too bad. You know,
No,
if we get the CFMoto within calendar year 25, that's not bad at all.
no, I agree with you because I don't think we're going to see the new 390 Adventure in 25. I think maybe 26 for us here. And I think the other thing where CFMoto, at least my understanding, and I need to look this up later, but they have a decent dealer network, especially because they have a lot of ATVs, and the ATV market there. I see CFMoto signs all over the place when I'm traveling, coast to coast. So I think their dealer market might even be better than like Royal Enfield, which also makes it more appealing. If you have service you can't do on your own or you need to get parts.
Here in upstate New York, I can go 30 minutes to one CFMoto shop and an hour to another CFMoto shop. If I want to get my Aprilia work done, if I were to go get an Aprilia, it's 3.5 hours to the closest place to get it worked on.
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, they're beating a very large brand already. Like you said, they have the power sports. They've already got partnerships. They already have power sport people that know how to work on their engines. They already have contracts with these power sport places. I mean, the CFMoto sign has gone up. I drive from New York to Tennessee on 81, and you'll see all the power sports places. They've got a CFMoto on there. There's a guy that is trained to work on CFMoto products. I think when their bikes drop, there's a remarkably good dealer network and shops available.
Yeah. Real quick, I just saw a comment here from Lobo de la Estepa from Patagonia, Argentina. Thanks for tuning in. The other thing I want to say about the CFMoto bikes is they are very price competitive. The 800 is priced remarkably well. They're smaller street bikes priced remarkably well. I think the new 450 MT is gonna beat the other bikes that we're looking at, or probably come in right around where the Royal Enfield is, and that is a lot of value for the money. It will have the reliability that we want, and it rides the way we hope it does once we get a chance to ride it.
And I'll touch on my thoughts, obviously, very soon about the new 390. But again, looking at CFMoto on one hand and Royal Enfield on the other, I, I can't imagine, unless it is significantly undercutting the CFMoto, I just don't see someone choosing that Royal Enfield. I think CFMoto is just offering so much. And as you said, they are known as providing value. If I was an investor in Royal Enfield right now, I think I'd be a little bit concerned about our entry into this market.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think likely within the India market, the Southeast Asia market, they'll be fine. They're they're loved down there. People ride them everywhere. I think
Well,
outside that market,
that's something to consider that we don't really think of here in the United States. In other countries, India specifically, they're patriotic as well as there are laws about production of products sold within the country. There is a built-in market for Royal Enfield, and realistically, they don't need to sell another bike anywhere else in the world, and they can still run a profitable business.
no. And I was just reading Honda. ADV Pulse had an article that Honda is coming out with a CB350X that is specifically for the India market because it's the largest market in the world. So whether or not that bike, Royal Enfield's 450 Himalayan, does well outside of India, it's like a bonus if it does, but they'll sell
Do
plenty.
well.
Yeah, yeah. So, all right, I'm gonna look at questions real quick and see what we have here. All right. For all of you leaving messages, appreciate it. Um, yeah, no, yeah, just a comment from Ron that CFMoto shops are closer than his KTM dealership, and that's exactly what Frank and I were talking about. Is we are seeing these dealerships pop up everywhere. I know here in Albuquerque, where I live, it's easy to get CFMoto. But as an example, the Aprilia dealership, like Frank was talking about, for me, it's over 4 hours away. That was a deciding factor when I bought the Tenere. When I was deciding between those, that how close it'd be. Let's see. You guys seen? I'll have to wait till a couple more messages come up. It's blocked on my screen. Okay, so now let's get on to the bike that we're really intrigued by and that everyone is dying for, and that is the new KTM 390 Adventure. So real quick, if you haven't been following what is coming, KTM has revamped their engine. The 390 engine is already out on the deck. They've increased the stroke, which is slightly increased the horsepower, but they changed the power delivery and the torque curve, so the torque curve is a little bit lower, and the peak power is also a little bit lower, from 9,500 RPM down to 8,500. So what we're seeing is basically spy shots on this next bike coming out. KTM has not made any official statements on the bike coming out, but there's plenty of spy shots that look like it's production ready. And it gives us hope that maybe in EICMA at the end of the year, November, that bike will be revealed. Now, KTM has not been going to EICMA, but what they've been doing is they've been, from their own YouTube channel and other press releases, been releasing bikes slowly when they're ready. And around EICMA, usually a week or two before, they'll start putting out press releases on new bikes, even though they're not going to be at EICMA. So what is speculated is that based on the pictures, it's going to have a 21, 18-inch wheel setup. Hopefully, they're going to use the same wheels that are on the 890, and it'll be tubeless. Now, I don't have any experience with those wheels. I know Frank does with his 790. So hoping it'll be tubeless. I think based on what I was seeing in some of the previous spy shots, that it's going to have the same travel as the 890 Adventure Model S, the base model, which is about 7.9 inches of travel. I think we should expect about that on this bike, which coming from 6.7 to 7.9, that little bit of extra travel will be helpful. But the more important part that travel is going to do is it should get us more ground clearance, which is really where the bike suffered. My riding on the bike wasn't necessarily, I never wished for more travel, but I did wish for more ground clearance. So that it seems like that will be solved. I think as KTM does, they throw every bell and whistle into their motorcycles. I don't expect this one to be any different. They'll have every connectivity, every rider mode that they have available. They may even put lean sensitive ABS in this to throw everything else at it. I think that's the one thing that our bike doesn't have, but it will come at a premium. I do expect this bike to cost more than the current model when it does come out because it's going to have more features, and with more travel, there's going to be more expenses to build it. So, anything you want to add, Frank?
Just the 390 does have lean sensitive ABS and traction control. It is bizarre. Right. It's a little chip that is in your telephone, and yet some manufacturers still don't put it in the bike. It's bizarre. It's like 20-year-old technology to determine angle, and the Touareg 660 does not have it. One of the most advanced adventure bikes out there, no lean sensitive ABS. So this one will probably have it. And what I like about this bike is that it's a 390. Now, what I like about the CFMoto is that it's everything, and it's new, and it's twin, and I think that gives it so much value. But I think you can't understate how valuable it is that this is still a 390. As you've found out now that you're working on your bike and you're doing more changes, it's so easy to get parts. This engine was released in 2013. Yep. Whatever part you want, it's already in a warehouse sitting on a shelf. I can call the nice lady at KTM World in Georgia, and she will have it to me in 2 days. Probably a little different for you on the West Coast.
It's not much slower.
But it's simply, I think one of the strengths of this bike will be, not only does it give you everything that we've complained about the bike, it's got better suspension, it's got more travel, it's got more ground clearance. It actually has a frame that's designed for an off-road bike. As much as I love my 390, there's no escaping the fact that that frame is a very lightly modified street bike.
Yeah.
You don't sit properly. The ergonomics are not correct. It requires risers, different handlebar, and just plain old getting used to it. The new bike looks like, we wanted you to go off-road, to the point where I'm a little concerned with how it's not going to be that great on-road.
That thought has crossed my mind as well. Yeah, I've been wondering about that. Because now, if you look at the spy shots, it looks like an enduro bike. It looks like it has rally DNA in it. The way they've changed the styling, which I think looks great, but what compromises are we going to have with that?
One of my good friends has a 690 Adventure, and it has all the power you would need to ride it on the highway. And you would never, ever want to ride it on the highway. It feels terrible, just absolutely terrible. The amount of changes you would need to make that enduro comfortable on the road, you might as well just buy a Tenere. And I'm a little bit concerned looking at that bike. I see that enduro bloodline. I see somebody took a 690 and said, this is what people are talking about their desire. Let's give them a lot of this. And I'm definitely concerned that when I get on a new 390 and I have to go 300 miles on the highway to get somewhere, that I'm going to be like, not enjoying myself at all. And then I'll love it off-road, I'm sure. It looks like they listened. They give us the front tire, the rear tire, again, the travel, the suspension. It's gonna be great off-road. They have too much experience for it not to be great off-road. Whereas CFMoto, we still have to wonder, did they nail it when you get off the pavement. But with the new 390, of course they nailed it. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, and I think the comparison with the 690 and the 390, one of the things is the 690, if you don't get it with a rally tower and a large windscreen, you're going to be suffering. It's going to be terrible. Where at least the 390, the spy shots, it looks like it has a fairing. It basically looks like it has a pseudo rally tower on it, so you do have that wind protection. Where even like the new 390 has that short screen, so it doesn't have that same wind protection. Where at least if the spy shots are any indication what's coming, it will, I think, be better than a 690. And
It
the
has
experience,
to.
right?
We're accustomed to taking this bike on the road. It has to be.
Right. And with the 390 engine, if all they're doing is increasing the stroke, hopefully it doesn't add any vibrations because the bike really it has a sweet spot at a higher RPM and it'll run there for hours with very little vibration. My other bikes that I've ridden, the parallel twins, they have just as much vibration at different RPM ranges, and you settle in, you can run for hours. So it is definitely a very intriguing bike. Let me see. I see a question here. So Ron is asking, do you think they keep the current model as the Adventure, and that the new model will be the Adventure R? I I don't think so. And the reason I say that is they're changing the engine, and I don't know if that's going to change the configuration of that engine in the new 390. If that will just slide into the old 390 chassis. I suspect because they never came out with the 390 Adventure R up until now, that I think that engine is gone, and I don't know that they're going to have two different models. Just my thought. Frank, what are your thoughts on that?
I think they will keep it. Now, we just got the Honda 300 Rally, which is a different stroker kit than is in the 250. But other than that, the engine is identical. But that's not new. Honda was producing the CB 250 and the CB 300 for 8 years together. That's the same engine with just the difference being the stroke. What that tells me is it's not really difficult to change manufacturing to run off the 250s you need and then change the stroke and run off your 300s. Honda was able to do it in Taiwan for at least 8 years. And there's no reason for the heads to change. Nothing changes. It's like 4 parts Honda had to change. I actually had my CRF 250L upgraded to a 300. It's just a kit you buy from Honda. It's a couple of parts. So there shouldn't be any reason they can't run the engines simultaneously. And looking at this bike, I don't think it's going to meet the Indian market. I think this bike has been redesigned for the European and American market. I think that the fact that the other one can be, the old one, the existing one, can be produced cheaply, I think they're going to want to keep that. They haven't even the S version, which is an even more inexpensive version of the 390 in India to bring in more sales. Again, they're competing with the darling of India, Royal Enfield. They can't charge more there. They have to have an inexpensive 390 to meet the commuter market. And I think this bike is a little more premium and it's not going to fit that market. So we
No,
may not get to keep it very long, but I bet it's around for years.
it's possible because they are still making the 250, and maybe the 390 in its current configuration goes away and it becomes the 250, and then you have the new 390 Adventure. So it's really hard to say because without knowing what their sales are of that bike worldwide and where it would fit. Yeah, I think you have some really good points on KTM keeping that bike, but whether or not it remains as a potential bike in the U.S. market or even the European market, that's yet to be determined. I suspect that it will not be offered in the U.S. anymore. They're slow bringing bikes here, and they're going to want to push people from the 390 into the old 390 into the new one.
I agree with that. I think the United States is not going to have multiple models. I think it's going to be an emerging market bike. But the benefit to that is that there'll be parts. That I think the frame is going to stay. It's going to be part of the 250. I think it'll probably
Yeah,
stay as the 390. I think that if I decide to keep my 390 and I need parts in 5 years, I bet they're readily available. I bet that
I,
bike is being produced somewhere else.
I agree. I agree. I still think, yeah, parts availability. Um, let's see. I think Ron has another question. Oh yeah, they still have the 390 RC and Duke. I wonder if the new engine goes in those. It's already in the Duke. The new 390 engine is already in the Duke, and that's why we know so much about that engine already. What its power and torque output is, and that it's a little bit longer stroke. So it went from what 373 cc's up to 399,
390,
somewhere,
yeah.
something
It
like
was
that.
either 393 or 399, but it was at least a 20 cc increase.
Right, right. So that's why we know so much about the engine. It's the rest of the bike that we're not really sure about. With travel, mostly it'd be suspension and chassis and connectivity, ABS, those things. But the engine is known, and I think the good thing with that is that engine is going to get worked out in the Duke, and by the time it shows up in the adventure, we'll have a couple years of use on it, know what to expect out of it. So, yeah.
And I think
How would
that's the strongest thing going for the 390. If you're looking at the three of them, the other bikes are new. We don't know how long those engines have been really stress tested. Like the CFMoto has been out, but it hasn't been out, I think, for more than a year and a half. It's not a time tested engine. Whereas this motor, it's from 2013. Every bug it has been worked out. There are so many parts lying on the shelf. And even if they do get rid of that engine and go with the longer stroke, all those parts, except for the stroke parts, are going to fit. It's time tested, it's inexpensive to buy parts for, and the shelves are full. So if you're thinking, I need a bike that if I can't get a part, well, then maybe I shouldn't get a CF Moto. But if I need a bike I can count on that I can call somebody in Georgia and have a part tomorrow or the next day, well, that 390 is going to be that bike. It's going to have everything you need available the day it's released. You're not going to have to wait for anything to hit the United States from China. It's already on our shelves.
engine wise? Yes, I agree.
Well, that's the failure you're most concerned with. It's very unlikely in the modern age that someone has bad steering bearings that go into a bike. It's very
No,
unlikely that someone's going to produce a wheel with a catastrophic failure.
but
It's
what
going to
about
be it's rotating thousands of times, and you're abusing. That's what's going to fail. Parts are
or
there.
that rear shock going up and down 1,000 times?
Yes. Well, the shock is cost cutting. Who knows how they're going to last?
Then it'd probably be very similar to that. All right, I've got question here, a comment slash question from Back Blade Runner. All of us that have bought 390s and have upgraded them to the tune of 3 to 4,000, I wish it was only that much, are going to be jealous of some of those new features that we just cannot have: longer suspension and bigger wheels. I agree with you, and I think for me, by the time that bike rolls out, which we actually get in the U.S. market, will be 2026. I will likely be ready for an upgrade if I haven't already tried out the 450 MT. So will there be some jealousy there? Yeah, which will probably push me to try it out. And my current 390 is going to be tired, to be honest. So, and it'll be about time to try something new and freshen things up. So, but yeah, I do think there'll be some jealousy from people. Now, a couple of the comments and questions that I've gotten, that not here on the live, but that I've gotten from others is it worth buying a 390 now or waiting? And my recommendation is, if you want to ride and you don't have a motorcycle, don't wait. go get one now. The used market for the 390 is pretty good. You can get some really nice 390 adventures at a reasonable price, where the people that bought them new and rolled them off the showroom floor lost their 2 or 3 grand right away, and maybe for whatever reason decided they didn't want to ride that bike or didn't like riding or whatever it was. I've seen quite a few out there for reasonable prices. So even if you bought a new one now, the next one's not going to be out for several years. So that's a lot of riding time, and especially if you're a newer rider, it's a lot of seat time to get more experience. And then when you get this new one, it's going to have a higher seat height, more travel, more off-road chops. You'll be ready for that increase in capability in the bike. So just my thoughts on it.
I think the answer is buy used. I would not recommend anyone buy a 390 new today. There's too much of a used market. There's too many bikes out there. You may have to travel a little bit to get it, but the price of the bike has been going up. It does have what I would call required farkles to truly enjoy it. And I'd say you need to buy the bike inexpensively enough to spend between $500 and $1,000 so that when you sit on that bike, you can do everything you want to and you can be comfortable doing it. So if you can find a used one, I think it's going to be a great buy because, as Matt said, you're going to have it for at least 2 years.
For sure.
And honestly, there's always a ceiling on motors or a floor on motorcycle used prices. I know that I can get today locally a 390 with low miles for $4,600. And I know that in 2 years, I'll still sell it for four. It's not going to drop that low. So it's a great time to buy a used one.
Right. Right. All right. So I know we're coming up on the hour mark, and that's really where we wanted to
Yeah, a
stop.
couple
I've got
of
one question in here that I want to get to, and then we're going to wrap up by which of the bikes we talked about, that if they're available today, which one we would go in and buy. So real quick, I've got a question from John S. Matt and Frank, what was your favorite bike that you have ever owned? Go ahead, Frank.
my 390 Adventure. I have right now faster bikes, and I have a bike that's better off road. But if I don't have a plan for the day and I just want to go have fun, that's the bike. And if I'm riding down the highway, I can get off and go wherever I want. If I'm riding some twisties and I see a dirt road, I can go there and I can do it. It's my favorite bike because before this, my favorite bike was a KLR 650 because it was the exact same thing. Whatever I wanted to do, I'd have fun. And this one's 75 pounds lighter.
Yep, I'm in that same boat. So I've had an XR 600 for a couple years. I had a KLR 650 that after riding it for about 9 months, I quit riding because I thought, if this is what riding is going to be, I hate it. I was out in California where I found myself on high-speed interstates quite frequently, and it was miserable. After that, I had an F700 GS, I've had an F800 GS, and I've had the R1200 GS and the KTM 390 Adventure. And I will tell you that the KTM 390 Adventure has been my most favorite bike I've ever ridden or owned. And just same as Frank, if I just want to go out and tool around, it's perfect for it. I love doing long distance travel on it. I really like how light it is. It is easy to ride. My seat height is really high because I put the fork extenders and I have an aftermarket seat. Even with that, I'm on my tippy toes, and because of the weight, it's still very manageable. So yeah, I've had a blast riding that. I've ridden it all over, and I would not hesitate taking it the way it is now out and ride it the same. So yeah. Okay, so Frank, if you had to buy one of these three bikes and they were all three available and money wasn't an object for you, which one would you buy?
I would plan on getting the 390 for so many reasons, but CFMoto has worked so hard, I'd have to ride it first. So I'm going to say there's like a 90% chance I'll go new 390, but I would not buy it if the CFMoto was available without trying that CFMoto because I think that it's going to be magical.
I am there with you as well. I am really intrigued by the CFMoto. I have enjoyed the 390 adventure, and I'm sure I would enjoy the new one. But I like trying different things, and uh, I think I would probably go with the CFMoto because I'm not going to get rid of my current 390. And having two bikes that are so similar, um, it just doesn't really fit for me. So, and I want to try something different. So I would likely go with the CFMoto when it comes out.
I agree. There'd be no reason to own both bikes. If I were to get the new 390, my 390 would be on Facebook that day. It would have to go. There would be no instance where I would get on it again because the other one should be superior for most things. So my other one would have to be sold. But CF Moto looks like
Yeah, unfortunately,
I don't know if I'll be able to say no to that.
yeah. And I think for me, I think I unfortunately will have written all the value out of my 390 by the time the new one comes out. So I will have to keep it. Um, yeah. Anyway, for those of you that joined, thanks. Thanks for joining. Thanks for the comments. Really appreciate it, Frank. Thanks for stopping in and coming up with this idea. This has been a fun conversation. And if you didn't catch it live, I will try to catch all your comments. If you leave any afterwards, I really appreciate it. Any final words, Frank?
No, thank you everyone for showing up. I appreciate it. Matt, thank you for having me. And I think it's a conversation worth having. I did want to hear what you had to say about all three of the bikes.
Great. Yeah. No, this was fun. Maybe we'll do this again on another topic down the road. So anyway, thanks everybody for
Take care, folks.
joining. Yeah, we will see you all out there.
Thanks, Matt.